Luffy just trained for 2 years. Why is he fighting this lame fish on steroids? Like, oh, mental growth, physical growth, character development.
J. Eliante pulling up, feeling like Harry Belafonte. Look at my racks, feel like Serena went from the back.
Hey, what's up? It's me, Meanie Mosey. Welcome to my channel where I talk about anime and I do anime related things. This is my Fishman Island video. Oh my gosh, wow, she made it. I liked this one a lot. I really liked it. It was like Hodi, but without like the dread. This arc was incredibly real with all the problems that the characters face and the solutions to them, and it tackled prejudice and racism, two very touchy, complicated, difficult topics. They're doozies, and it tackled them, and it issued an argument against them, of course, while not dropping a single ounce of One Piece-ness. It remained the show that it was. It remained the story that it was, and related to the real world, and came back. Or I mean, it didn't go there and come back. It stayed there the whole time. Like, they were one in like remaining the same story about like this crazy main character and his like little crew and addressing complicated subjects, and it still, I'm just like hitting the nail on the head or beating the horse while it's dead. It just did it. It did it perfectly. I know you get what I'm trying to say, but it did that. It did do it. But that is incredibly difficult, to communicate a message without getting preachy or putting your own words as an author, as a human being, to communicate a message like that without sounding didactic or sounding like you're trying to teach someone something. You're trying to convince people to change their minds. You're trying to educate. Yeah, there's a message in this arc, and it was communicated through the characters, not through the author, or not through Oda, and it was wonderful. Yes, it was fantastic. If this is setting the stage for what we can expect from the One Piece arcs going forward, then I have my work cut out for me as far as analyzing all of this goes. With all that being said, in this video, I'm going to talk about the return to Hodi, the Straw Hats' new appearances, the strength of the Straw Hats, Fishman Island, the spectrum of human sentiment within Fishman Island, Vanderdecken. Actually, no, I'm not going to talk about Vanderdecken because like he's not worth talking about. Sorry. Fighting correctly, Fukaboshi's destroy everything speech, Cody Jones, a villain or an idea, blood, heroism, Cody Jones' death, and then I'm going to talk about all of the post-arc shenanigans that go on and all that, because there are a whole bunch of them. Return to Hodi. I think this was done perfectly. The fact that Zoro arrived first and still had time to get lost while still being present. I mean, in the anime, it shows him like showing up at Shaki's bar, and I bet Mihawks and Perona walked him up to the door and dropped him off there right before he opened, and then they left. I don't think that he could have gotten there without them. But he got there first, and then he got lost, and that was wonderful. There was a whole entire fake Straw Hats crew that's trying to recruit people. They're all just a bunch of scumbags, and Chopper actually fell for it, and he's just as gullible as ever. Luffy is trying to be inconspicuous, and he has this the biggest backpack you've ever seen, full of all the food that Boa packed for him. And he has this like fake mustache, and it just looks hella dumb. They all ended up running to get off of Hodi as quickly as possible, and they were all helped out by their friends who were there for them in the past 2 years. Like, everybody's people showed up for them. Brooks' long arm people, Nami's old weathermen, Usopp's Heraclean. Yes, Heraclean, something like that. All of them showed up, and like Perona Aragos and like Boa Hancock and Rayleigh, and they were all there, and it was just so like, oh my gosh, it was just a wonderful send-off, and I just like really loved it. I loved everything about it. That was probably the best way that they could like, I don't know how it could have been done better. It was hilarious and it was heartwarming, and I just loved all of it. So the Straw Hats' new appearances. So these were revealed very gently. I don't know why I'm like thinking this is such a big issue. It's not a big issue. One, I don't know why I'm being so utsy about it, but like they changed how they looked and and they revealed it, and the reveal was wonderful. Like I'm using wonderful too much, but it just is. But Nami showing up in the bar, Usopp sitting next to her like, you want a drink? And he tilts up his head. It's like, Usopp, I love you. Oh my gosh. Ah. And so like that was great, and just like I'm not even following the script, I'm just talking about it, but they've all grown, so of course they look different. And now that I'm seeing them in the world and seeing that they're the same people that I know and love, and that they haven't changed personalities, just appearances, I am more accepting of them. Sanji has gotten so bad in his girl craziness to the point where he is losing massive amounts of blood, and Chopper has to monitor him. He can't even look at Nami and Robin. And at this point, I was like, okay, this is kind of ridiculous. But then I remembered that I was watching One Piece, and that this is probably one of the least ridiculous things that has happened within the show. Let's be honest, let's be real. Sanji's reaction, considering his character, was to be expected. If he required anything less than a blood transfusion, then he wouldn't be Sanji. He's just always been this level of ridiculous. I don't know. Of course, I'll get more into this later, but his blood loss was woven into the plot. It wasn't like, there's a lot of, I don't want to say fan service because it's not really fan service. The display of his perverted mind is used as comedy, and that, I don't want to say potty humor, but it's kind of like just like little boy humor. Just that was woven into the plot, and it wasn't just like off to the side. It wasn't just like those little Brussels sprouts that you put on the side. No, it was like the peas mixed in with all of the stuff. Why am I talking about vegetables? I guess I'm hungry. It was woven into the plot. It was an important thing that he needed a blood transfusion, not just comic relief. So I'm at least happy that that happened. Sanji, calm down. I know you're not gonna calm down. Get a hold of yourself. Like, you're an adult, man. Like, ugh. He's not gonna stop. I know he's not, so I'm just gonna deal with it. Whatever. The strength of the new Straw Hats. So the Straw Hats have gotten so much stronger. There are no weak people on this team anymore. We're done with having weak people on the team, and everyone did the work that they needed to do in the past 2 years, and it shows. And there's nobody's protecting Nami anymore because Nami does not need to be protected. Chopper does not need to be protected anymore. Usopp still uses his Kabuto. Nami still uses her climb attack, except the damage that they deal is greatly increased, and I'd say it's increased to being on par with Zoro and Sanji pre-time skip. Their strength is allowing them to behave like the pirates that they are. And it's funny because they're still like a silly group of people, but now they're dangerous. They took over Ryugu Palace on accident. They did not mean to have everybody tied up and ready during the attack. They just chained them up because they chained them up. And so that's just ridiculously funny. In pre-time skip, they all would have been captured, but now they just said, no thanks, we don't want to be captured today. And they became the captors. Anyway, Fishman Island. It is One Piece, so the world building is great. It is expected at this point, but it just has to be acknowledged every time. So let me explain why the world of Fishman Island is so great. So it's called Fishman Island. It's more like a bubble floating in the bottom of the ocean than an island, but stranger things have happened. It's built in the only particular area in the bottom of the sea that gets sunlight from the sunlight tree Eve. So the whole island is basked in this artificial sunlight from this tree, and it's not real sunlight, and that's important. In the uppermost bubble living in Ryugu Palace, closest to the real sun, is the royal family, where Queen Otohime lived, the main person leading Fishman Island to live peacefully with the humans, and she strove for coexistence. And at the very bottom, in the Fishman district, where the light doesn't reach, it's a lawless area where all the outcasts and the orphans go, and that's where Fisher Tiger, Arlong, and Cody Jones came from, and the latter two being the strongest voices against Queen Otohime's movement. And in the middle bubble, you have the citizens, who throughout this arc are being pulled either which way, split between reaching for the sun and remaining in darkness, and they're easily influenced, and they're not good, and they're not bad, and they're honest with themselves, and they're honest with the queen. It's like, it's built. Oh my gosh, okay. I'm gonna map out a spectrum of human sentiment. There's a variation of opinions within Fishman Island. But the way that Fishman Island is built, it's like the opinions on fishman-human relations within the three bubbles, they range according to where you live in the world, in the island. Yeah, you can take the whole island and put it on a spectrum of human sentiment, and everyone on the island will fall somewhere on this line. And I picked a few characters to be focal points on the line, and I'll go out of order, but there's a visual. At least I'll try to make a visual, so you'll be fine. The first is Otohime. She is very far on the love side for this line. You can see her love for humans was a decision that she had to make in order to make her dreams a reality. So Otohime loved her people so much that she wanted to give them the world, and she wanted to give them the real sun, the real sky, all of these wonderful places that humans happen to inhabit. She wasn't going to let the excuse of hating the humans or fearing them for what they'd done stop her from pursuing her dream. Was she naive? A little bit, yeah, I think so. She had an unshakable optimism, but I don't think she'd had much experience at all with humans, certainly not as much as Fisher Tiger. Overall, she did not judge humans for their past, and she was quick to forgive those she met, like the Celestial Dragon. And she was the epitome of kindness and love, and she was guided by a higher purpose that did not allow any room for hatred. Next on the line is Fisher Tiger. He did not care for the humans because he was exposed to the extent of their depravity. He was enslaved by the Celestial Dragons, I imagine enslaved with other humans. Though, despite being enslaved, he refused to kill the humans, refused to be like them, and he was even able to go out of his way to care for Koala and return her to her family. But in the end, he was betrayed for that also. He went so far as to trust the humans despite everything, and it backfired. In the end, it was his deep-rooted and validated animosity that prevented him from being able to accept human blood into his own body to save his life. He refused to be like them. He did not want to owe humans for anything. He would rather die than have his life preserved by the blood of a human. Arlong is next. So Arlong had no sympathy for humans. He heard and saw what they did to Fisher Tiger and his brothers, and he chose not to forget that. He wanted to take the do unto others as they do unto you route, and even taking the do unto others before they do unto you route. There was no grace, no forgiveness. His hatred was deeper than Fisher Tiger's, and it did not allow for the clarity to not become like the people he hated. While that response is understandable, even reasonable if we're working with pirate morality, what's wrong with it is that it perpetuates a cycle and it halts progress, and it creates people like Nami and Kokoyashi Village who have a real reason, a legitimate reason to hate and fear fishmen because of one bad example. And until one side takes a step forward towards forgiveness, the cycle will continue throughout generations, and hatred will fester, and you will have children who grow up into adults who fight and hate because that's all they know how to do. Children like Cody Jones. Cody Jones is a simple and sad case. Growing up, he only heard stories of hatred passed down. He was raised and taught to hate humans, and that hatred was ingrained in him. And this is why Otohime and Jinbei kept saying that there were children present, because like whenever there was a choice to be made, whenever like the Celestial Dragon shot them, whenever something momentous was happening, they said there were children present in order to remind them of what the right decisions were to make. That's because these were children that could become like Hodi. Prince Fukaboshi asked Hodi, what did the humans ever do to you that you hate them so much? And Hodi said nothing. And this is where I think the steroids come into play. It's kind of like a little theory, a little headcanon or whatever. But at least in my interpretation of it, Hodi and the new Fishman pirates were running on hatred alone and not personal experience. But it wasn't their own hatred. It was the hatred of all the generations that came before them that was packed down. And then when you have that much hatred, you have to act on it. But their strength alone was not enough to act on it. It wasn't enough to wreak the havoc that their anger called for. And so they needed to supplement it with additional strength, so they took steroids. Yeah, he felt he was called by heaven to do the noble thing and destroy humans, take over fishmen, put down the evil queen who preached love. He felt it was his duty to do what he was doing. So yeah, that's just how bad it could get if you don't mind the children. Next is Shirahoshi, and Shirahoshi is very much like Cody Jones. And let me explain. So she is a product of her environment, which is why she's like Hodi, but on the opposite side. Otohime taught her to forgive people no matter what. And then she went on to live isolated after Otohime died for 10 years. And so that forgiveness was instilled in her, just like the hatred was instilled in Hodi. Shirahoshi lived for years knowing that Hodi was the actual one who killed her mother. But when she saw him, she did not hate him because that's not how she was raised. Hodi was told to hold on to his hatred, while Shirahoshi was told to make sure that it didn't spread, to forgive. It was her mother's dying wish. It was one of the last things that she heard before she got locked away in a tower. She had nothing else to do but to forgive and just live. So next is Jinbei. Jinbei is the center of this spectrum. If the citizens of Fishman Island ended up on the Jinbei area of the spectrum, then they're in good shape. Fishman Island's gonna be alright. So Jinbei was a part of the Sun Pirates. He worked right next to Fisher Tiger and Arlong. He served on the Royal Guard and respected Queen Otohime, even if he didn't agree with her at the time. But Jinbei was right there alongside Arlong. He saw what happened to Fisher Tiger. He saw it. He witnessed it with his own eyes. He experienced the betrayal right there. But he followed Fisher Tiger's rules of no violence. He understood what Fisher Tiger was trying to do. He understood that he could not become like the humans, like the worst humans that he's seen. Yeah, so Jinbei was able to recognize the differences between the good and bad humans, just like there are differences between good and bad fishmen, technically. And kind of having that wisdom to differentiate and not generalize a whole entire group is just what is needed within this world. And, well, I say this world, I mean Fishman Island, so I guess this world and this world. Jinbei's perspective allows him to make an informed choice and not just go along with hatred that's been passed down and not go along with blind optimism. So he is perfectly neutral. He trusts who he trusts, he believes in who he believes in, and he fights who he needs to fight. And Jinbei is great because of this. But he's right there in the middle. He could have gone to the bad way, but he didn't. He had reason to, but he didn't. Because he could have just been just like Arlong, but he wasn't. And he saw the good in Arlong too, because that's his brother, technically, I guess, however they refer to each other. But he freed Arlong, and he saw what it did to Nami. He saw Arlong lost. He saw Nami's a good person, and he Jinbei is cool. Jinbei is neutral. Jinbei is chill. We love Jinbei. We're gonna move on from this spectrum because, it's done. So the fighting has changed, and this kind of goes along with the strength of the Straw Hats. It's kind of that continued. But I noticed in the earlier arcs, pretty much up until Sabaody Archipelago, the fights would go down the same way each time. Since Luffy was the strongest person on the crew by a large margin, based on the enemies that were left him and his durability, Luffy was the strongest person on the crew. Oda would incapacitate him whenever the fighting got started, just so that he could show up later in the battle and finish it. And in this arc, he is the first person on the scene, technically, and he walks on the battlefield, knocks out 50,000 people with his haki alone. He's following a plan, and he's not being impulsive, and it just makes me really, really proud of him because he's learned. Younger Luffy would not have done well in this battle, because in this battle, they had to fight correctly. This is a situation where they couldn't solve this conflict with violence, but this conflict needed to be solved violently. But if they were the ones to initiate said violence, it would do the opposite of solving the main conflict, which is the sentiment of fishmen towards humans. So Luffy couldn't just go and beat up Hodi like he wanted to, because if he did, it would just be another human to come and do harm to the fish people. So instead, they had a plan where Shirahoshi would call on him to help. And it was very important that this alliance was seen because everybody was watching. It was very important that they knew that the Straw Hat Pirates were working together with the royal family in order to defeat Hodi, because it wouldn't have gone well otherwise. It would have just pushed all the fishmen further down into animosity, further down into hatred of humans. Even though Hodi has like a evil voice, he's still prominent, a leader, I guess. So yeah, it would have been disrespectful. Yeah, we know what kind of pain Luffy went through to learn, like, every single time he had to move on and impel down. Every single time that he had to follow the rules and just not do what he wanted when he was on his way to save Ace. And the fact that he failed, they were all lessons that helped him get to the point where he is now. But he's really different and his heart is the same, and I adore him so much for that, and I can't wait to see what else he does. But Usopp is not a liar anymore. That's also different. Usopp does what he says he's going to do. If he lies now, it's just as a distraction and not as a form of intimidation. Chopper has grown so much. I'm so freaking proud of Chopper, because Chopper has gained control of all of his little rumble points, and even the big one. Oh my gosh, when he turned into that big giant Chopper monster and he was like all roaring, and Usopp was like, oh my gosh, no, Chopper. And Chopper was like, it's all right, I can control it. And he could talk in it, and I was just like, I was so proud of him. That he, like, I think it was Zoro who called him a monster or something like that. And he's like, I don't mind being a monster. Because I have friends now, or something along the lines of that. And I was just like, he's like, I'm gonna be the monster that Luffy needs me to be. I'm just like, oh, mental growth, physical growth, character development. I just love it. And so, yeah, their fighting has changed and it is wonderful. We're moving on to talk about, what did I say I was going to talk about? Talking about a whole bunch. Fukaboshi's destroy everything speech. This gave me chills, gives me chills, is chilling. Oh, let's talk about it. So humans did not do one damn thing to Hodi, and he's filled with empty cruelty. He wants the humans to be evil just so that he can be justified in his hatred. And the royal family ignored the Fishman district, remaining willfully ignorant of the hatred that was festering there. And instead they focused on moving forward instead of addressing the past first. And they looked outward at what they could do to solve Fishman-human relations instead of looking inward. And it was this hatred that made people hesitant to sign petitions. It was the hatred of a silent majority who don't hate enough to cause harm, but they still hate. They didn't hate enough to take up arms and go fight humans, but they hated enough to not sign a petition. They didn't hate enough to say it out loud, but they still hated. They hated just enough to prevent progress. And this chapter, this arc just had some banger quotes. And so, like, one of them is in chapter 644, where he's, Fukaboshi said, the sorrow of the dead belongs to the dead. Hatred is just an illusion that the living create in order to amplify their own. This whole speech was Prince Fukaboshi looking at Hodi and seeing a mirror of his own heart and seeing how awful the hatred that he was harboring really was. Like, there was a piece of his heart that entirely related to Hodi, and Hodi just kept looking more and more monstrous as the arc went on. And so it was when Prince Fukaboshi saw him like this that he made the speech, and he acknowledged it, and he told Luffy to destroy it. He said, instead of saying that Hodi was bad, he took the responsibility for the role that he had to play in creating Hodi. And so he said, destroy the whole island. You don't need it anymore. Get rid of everything. Just wash it all away. And it's so good. Okay. It was a very good sign that actual progress will be made when the prince can look inside himself, look at an enemy and see himself and realize what needs to change. I've seen in places that people are like, Hodi's just like a vanilla villain. He's just so plain compared to everybody else we've seen, like, who have actual ideals. Hodi sucks. He's a horrible person to fight. Aren't we past all of that? Aren't we getting difficulter? Aren't we getting more intense? Aren't we trying to be better? Luffy just trained for 2 years. Why is he fighting this lame fish on steroids? Is pretty much what I'm getting about Hodi. And so, is Hodi a villain or is he an idea? Hodi, I wrote it down on a sticky note. I hope you don't mind me reading. But some people say Hodi's an empty villain and Hodi has no motives. And that may be true. But Hodi is real. And there are people in this world who are just like Hodi. There are people who are raised in a different environment who cannot and will not understand. Oh, no, okay, that's not how I want to say it. But anyway, Hodi had no tragic backstory. I mean, yes, it's tragic that is it tragic that he ended up the way he did? It's almost like he was never given a chance to be good. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time for his whole entire life. Hey Siri.
Tell me about it.
Define villain.
Villain means, in a film, novel, or play, a character whose evil actions or motives are important to the plot.
A person whose actions or motives are important to the plot. He's not a complicated villain. He is not. He is so uncomplicated as a villain that I think he represents more of an idea than a villain, than a person. He is more of the representation of hatred of Fishman Island. Because as the arc went on, he became more and more monstrous. He stopped talking. He's just like this big white-haired, like, monster-looking thing. They called him a monster. And so he became like their hatred personified, boiled down, embodied into this former person who is now just a single organism striving for evil, or striving for hatred to reign. And he lost his humanity in the end. And so that is why I think he represents more of an idea than of an actual villain. And so the fact that Luffy had to fight an idea, and kind of taking that into consideration, that is what makes this a complicated battle, because of the struggle of what to do, when to do it, how to do it, the right way, the wrong way. And it wasn't anything that challenged Luffy's morals. It wasn't anything that allowed him to understand the villain. It wasn't anything like that. It didn't allow for any respect of the villain, because he wasn't a villain anymore, because he was an idea. He was hatred. It was hatred that people cared for, saw within themselves, and Luffy had to beat it, and he did it right. And that is where the challenge was in this arc. So, let's talk about blood. Luffy needed a blood transfusion in the end, and the law prevented people from donating blood, which is something that also contributed to the internal animosity that the royal family ignored. Jinbei was the one to step up and donate his blood, setting an example for how things should be going forward. And what this moment does is it goes and it corrects the past. It goes and it corrects the past in the best way. Fisher Tiger's hate wouldn't let him take the human's blood. He chose to actively deny a passive form of acceptance. But in the end, Jinbei is giving blood, which is an active form of acceptance that requires a sacrifice on his part. So fixing the issue in this way provides the internal resolution that Fishman needed. So throughout this arc, the humans don't change, and they have not changed. This arc is not about humans at all. This entire arc has been about the Fishmen. And I think it's very real that they're the only ones taking the steps towards acceptance now, because the acceptance on the human side is not going to happen magically and simultaneously just because the Fishmen decided to take the steps that they're taking now. The traffickers are going to traffic, the celestial dragons are going to celeste, the government's going to govern, and that will be another test that the fishmen will need to overcome in taking this new idea and going to the new world and choosing to love, refusing to have time to hate like Otohime. And so in the end, I'm just putting into my own words what the show said itself. And this is another banger quote. Oh my gosh, I don't even remember what chapter this one's from. It might have been a mix of like a chapter in the anime because I watched both of them. But if you harm someone, or if someone harms you, the same red blood is spilled. And this small truth provides a pathway through the prejudice that divides us and the conflicts that we create as though they were never there at all. That's just something that you read when you're like reading a manga for fun, and then you come across something like that. It makes you stop and stare at the page and just sit in awe. So heroism. 2 times the concept of being a hero was discussed in this arc, but I really mean shot down. So Luffy was explaining how he wasn't a hero because a hero would have to share their meat with everyone, and he didn't want to. He also said he didn't want to be celebrated just for doing what he believed was right. So in Luffy's mind, I'm getting that he believes that in order to be a hero, you need to have a certain level of selflessness that he didn't / does not want to possess. Now, I love heroes. I love Marvel. I love My Hero Academia. And I believe that Luffy is a hero. Luffy is not self-sacrificing. At least he doesn't intend to be, but he is a fighter. And in some aspects, he's selfish. In some aspects, he's greedy. I say he's greedy. He's greedy with the idea of being king of the pirates. Words are really important in this arc. And whenever anyone says that they're going to be king of the pirates and Luffy is around to hear it, Luffy immediately shuts it down, says, hey, no, you're wrong. I'm going to be king of the pirates. Anytime anyone says that, ever, and Luffy hears it, he shuts it down immediately and negates it with his own claim. So he is greedy about that role within the world. And he is very kind. And a hero is defined as a person who is admired or idealized for courage and outstanding achievements or noble qualities. Luffy, his kindness and strength and unwavering dedication to his friends are all noble qualities. Luffy says he does not want to be celebrated. And so I thought of other words that could define him that might fit into what he'd like. A champion, a person who fights or argues for a cause on behalf of someone else, a defender, someone who defends someone or something, a savior, a person who saves someone or something, especially a country or a cause, from danger, who is regarded with the veneration of a religious figure, a liberator, a person who liberates or frees from imprisonment or oppression. And I think a liberator fits Luffy the most. Because there are so many times that he's freed people, not because he's freed people just because he believes it's right. And he wants to be king of the pirates, which is the most free person in the world. So Luffy is not a hero, but he is a liberator. He is awesome. I don't know what else to say on that, but yeah, he's freaking fantastic. Cody Jones' fate. So I'm going to tie this back to the steroids real quick, but I think it's appropriate that I know people don't die in One Piece, but Cody Jones, at the end, he was revealed to be extremely close to death, as him and his entire crew were old and decrepit. And so I like the idea of him being the representation of hatred in Fishman Island, and then him dying in a cell, locked away and aging old, is a very good symbolism in this arc. So the aftermath, the post-arc shenanigans, the ship of promise, Joy Boy, he lived during the 100-year void and failed to keep a promise to the mermaid princess. That happened. And then you have Luffy at the end making another promise. Just promises are important in this world because there are so many promises that have been made. This is one promise that hasn't been kept, and it's been acknowledged that it hasn't been kept, so it shows that that's important. Shirahoshi is the queen of the Sea Kings, and she is the ancient weapon Poseidon that they kidnapped Robin for. And so that happened. She can do that. Luffy can hear the Sea Kings just like Gold Roger could. So that's interesting. You keep getting all of these parallels between Luffy and Gold Roger, even though Ace was his son. Aokiji resigned from the Navy because Akainu is the... I don't know what his title is. It's not Admiral. Admiral Sengoku, Governor Sengoku. I forgot what the title was. Oh my gosh. But Akainu replaced Sengoku. So that's not good. The 4 emperors are Blackbeard, Shanks, Kaido, and Big Mom, and they're all in the New World. So that's fun. Jinbei was invited to join the Straw Hat Pirates, except he said y'all can hold off on that for a little bit because I think he had some business with Big Mom to attend to. So that's happening. I am happy with that he is going to join the crew eventually at some point. He made a promise. You know what they say about promises in this world. Big Mom's candy. Okay, Big Mom. This is an imminent threat. So I was wondering, if she was protecting Fishman Island, then where was she when Hodi attacked? Isn't that kind of... Well, I mean, when would they have called her? Would she have protected if they called her? If they said, one of our own is rising up against us? I don't know. Does her protection only guarantee outside protection? I don't know. But she seems crazy because she is straight up eating her people, I think. I think that's what I saw. I think she was eating people. And she called them up, asked for her candy, and this was just really funny to me because, like, Luffy called, he answered the phone, hello. He's like, well, I ate all the candy. And she's like, all 10 tons? Well, I ate all 10 tons. And it's just like, what the world, Luffy? And he's already picking fights with an emperor. And, like, you don't know about Big Mom and Kaido, but Shanks and Blackbeard are important and powerful. So he's gonna have to fight her, and she's on their level eventually. So that's wonderful, and he's already picking fights before he even gets to the New World. Good job, Luffy. And he said he pretty much claimed Fishman Island as his territory. He's like, I'm gonna go, I'm gonna kick your ass, and I'm gonna take your island. So, nice to know you're as bold as ever. Jinbei is aligned with Big Mom. He does not know that Luffy just picked a fight with her. And then there was the whole kind of prophecy about Luffy destroying the island. And what's her name? Madam Sharky. Madam Sharky, I think. You have Sharky and Shocky. But she is the fortune teller, and she was like, Madam Charlie. But she was like, he's like, Luffy's gonna destroy the island. And they were saying they didn't know whether it could be like the next day or like within several years. And since he didn't destroy it right then, she was like, oh, I must have been wrong, even though she's never been wrong. So I think that, like, that's there for a reason. Luffy is so totally going to destroy the island eventually. He's going to destroy Fishman Island. I don't know how or why, but he's going to do it. You don't just say things like that and just move on from it, pretend it didn't happen. No. But yeah, it's not really a prediction because I'm like, you said it's true, it's got to be true. But yeah, oh my gosh, I finished Fishman Island, and that's what I think about it. A lot of stuff just got covered, and I am done now, so I'm going to go drink some water. Fishman Island, it was really great. I really liked it. I really, really enjoyed it. Had a lot of good stuff in it, and I'm excited. I am just in love with this series. I simultaneously wish I had read it sooner, and I am thrilled that I'm reading it now. That's all I have for you today. Be sure to like this video if you like this video, obviously. Subscribe. Just make me really, really happy if you would subscribe. And then leave a comment. I love hearing your comments. I love hearing what you guys think. Plus, like, if you just leave a comment, it just lets the algorithm know that, like, this girl is making super dope One Piece videos. And I'll see you guys in Punk Hazard. Oh gosh, you're getting further and further in. All these names of these arcs that I know and just haven't reached yet. Oh my gosh. But yeah, I'll catch you guys next time in Punk Hazard. Bye.